Just move this over a little bit. Okay, I actually had a kind of a cute experience. I had given this title to Zamira a long time ago. I think even before we started the cycle of Nachomi. Zamira was so on top of it, sent out spreadsheets for Yemei Iyun throughout the entire cycle. So even before we started. So I gave her this title a very long time ago. And then, I guess it was just over about a week and a half ago, I think the parah came out on Shabbat. And I was standing and talking to somebody outside of shul, and she said, "Such a weird parak today. What is this?" The whole episode with Ritzpa Bat Aya, which is very strange, and I think that took up most of the time on the podcast for Nachomi. And then after the second half of the parak, there's this very strange pasuk. David got tired, and Avishai came to help him. And this woman says to me, like, "What does that mean? What is that happening? What's happening?" David went to war against the Plishtim, and all of a sudden, he got tired, and Avishai came to help him. And I said, "Wait, I'm going to be talking about that at the Siyum Nachomi." So, and then we got into a whole discussion about the sons of Tzruya. Like, it's a very odd relationship, and Yoav particularly is a very difficult character to try to understand. So that's our goal today, is to try to understand a little bit more about first the individual characters of Avishai and Yoav, and then the dynamic between David and Bnei Tzruya, the sons of his sister Tzruya, in general. Okay, so I gave you a little graphic there, family tree. Yishai had 2 daughters. The first is Tzruya, she's the more famous one, who had 3 sons, Yoav, Avishai, and Asael. And then there's a second daughter who's mentioned. We don't meet her until well into Shmuel Bet. Her name is Abigail, which can get confusing because David also had a wife, Abigail, but this is a different Abigail. And she's called Abigail Bat Nachash. And Rashi there says that Nachash is in fact Yishai. It says Abigail Bat Nachash Achot Tzruya. So it's like a little, she's the sister of Tzruya. Tzruya we know is the daughter of Yishai. So how could she be Abigail Bat Nachash? And Rashi cites the teaching of Chazal that Yishai was one of the few people who died be'etyo shel Nachash. He himself personally never sinned. Therefore, he was not chayav mitah on an individual level, and he only died because of the decree of Hashem following the sin of Adam and Chava, eating from the tree. But because of the temptation of the Nachash, that's why Yishai had to die. He was mortal like everybody else, but he himself never sinned. So Abigail is called Bat Nachash. And then there are 7 other sons, the ones who were rejected for the Malchut, and finally David, who is the youngest. Okay, so there's a case here. Yoav and David are, we don't know the exact ages, the age difference, but there's a sense that they're either close in age. It could be that Yoav even is a little bit older because he is the son of David's much older sister. And we've seen such dynamics even in our own time. So I have a niece and a great niece who are in the same class. Right, so aunt and niece who have been in the same class since nursery, and they're already well into high school. It's cute. So it's an interesting, just like sort of file that away as we get into the dynamic between David and Yoav, that even though David is the uncle, Yoav is very close to his age, if not even older.
Just a question, why do you have Abigail and the 2 boys in a
That's just the way, when I was, the computer put her there. But it was, no, it just, I think to make room for Yoav, Avishai, and Asael, that the computer, I put in the information in the list, and that's how it made the graphic. So I asked the programmer, I don't know. Okay. The 3 sons of Tzruya. Whenever we have 3 of something, 3 is a significant number in Judaism in many ways. And we know from Sefer Mishlei, 3 is kechut ha-mishulash asher lo bimheira yinatek. When you have 3 strands of a rope and they're woven tightly together, think of it for those with longer hair. Remember back to the days of our youth when, a braid stays in much more securely than on Shabbos you can't braid, so maybe take 2 strands and you twist, and that always falls out, right? Because it doesn't hold very tightly, but a braid holds tightly. So, chut habishulash, a strand that's woven together from three individual ropes is very, very strong. And so, Mishbetzot Zahav cites the Rab Moshe David Wali, who was a contemporary of the Ramchal in Italy, and he wrote, so Katav, in the first source, number 1, Vayusham Shlosha Bnei Tzruya, the 3 sons of Tzruya, Yoav, Avishai, Asael. Rab Moshe David Wali wrote, Ve'omnam elu shlosha b'nei Tzruya hayu klalut shorsho ha'elyon min harosh ve'ad haraglayim. They shared the same sort of neshama, the same nefesh. There is a very, very tight bond among these 3. They come from the same source. Ki Yoav haya bivchinat harosh, and they were like one body. Yoav was the head. V'lachen hu sar tzva'o shel David. That's why he holds the most elevated position. He is the commander-in-chief. Avishai haya bivchinat haguf. Avishai is like the trunk, the body, the core of the person represented by these 3. Asael haya bivchinat haraglayim mamash. And Asael was the legs. And we saw that very vividly. We're going to review some things that we covered in Nachyomi. Asael was the quick runner, the swift runner. He was running away from battle. He was pursuing Avner, who was running away from battle, right? And Avner kept saying to him, desist, turn aside, don't continue to pursue me because I'll have no choice but to kill you. And Asael persisted, and Avner did very fatefully turn around and kill Asael. And we saw there that Asael, not the race doesn't always go to the swiftest runner. Avner was a skilled and experienced warrior, and his strategic thinking was able to save him unfortunately, with not good results for Asael. And that's why we'll see that when Asael was killed, his brothers, they couldn't let it go of it because it's like a part of them was taken away from them. If they are a whole, one whole together, the 3 of them, head, trunk, and legs, what happens when one loses one's legs? It's a very, very difficult thing. Unfortunately, we're seeing that today, and I'm sure many are familiar with the very incredibly inspiring story of Elisha Medan, the son of Harav Medan Shlita, and the loss of his legs. He's such a gibor that he certainly has continued to he even talks about continuing to fight, but definitely experiencing a very, very difficult rehabilitation because it's not easy to move forward from something like that. And that's how Yoav and Avishai felt when Asael was taken from them. So even though Avner was justified in killing him, nevertheless, the loss was extremely profound, very, very deeply felt by his 2 brothers who could not let go of it. And that's the klalut of Yoav, Avishai, and Asael. We don't see Asael very much. We only know him from that one episode, so we don't have a lot of personality to explore, but the relationship is important to understand from that episode. We're going to look particularly first at Avishai. The first time we're introduced to Avishai is in Shmuel Aleph, Perek Chavav. Vayan David vayomer el Achimelech Hachiti ve'el Avishai ben Tzruya achi Yoav lemor mi yerediti el Shaul el hamachaneh. David is being pursued by Shaul. Shaul is camped across, and David sees an opportunity, and he says, which one of you 2, he turns to 2 presumably strong warriors, and says to each of them, or to both of them, Achimelech Hachiti. By the way, for anybody who watched the Chidon HaTanakh, that was one of the questions yesterday, who is called Hachiti, and the answer was Achimelech. These kids have brains like computers. It's unbelievable. In the Chidon HaTanakh, who is called Hachiti? And the answer was Achimelech from this pasuk. Achimelech Hachiti. And somehow he retrieved that on the spot. The kid, the one who answered got it right. From the whole Tanakh, retrieved Achimelech. Amazing. Because again, he's not somebody that we see again. He kind of disappears because he doesn't rise to the occasion here. He kind of vanishes from the story, and yet this kid was able to, unbelievable. Anyway, okay, so David turns to his 2 warriors and says, which one of you is going to come with me to go face Shaul? And Avishai steps forward and he says, I will go. Now, how is Avishai identified? We've never seen him before. This is our first meeting with him. And he's described as Avishai ben Tzruya, so the son of David's sister, Achi Yoav, whom we also have not yet met. But that's how he's referred to. Avishai is the brother of Yoav. So clearly, Yoav was known. Like if Avishai stepped forward and people start like, ooh, who's that? He's so brave, he's so courageous, and he's the brother of Yoav. What do you expect? Of course, people knew by saying he's the brother of Yoav, that kind of explains that gvura that it took for him to step forward. So he steps forward and he goes with David, and they come upon the encampment of Shaul and Avner, and all of the soldiers are fast asleep. I'm sure you remember this because it's a dramatic episode in Shmuel Aleph. They're all fast asleep. And what does Avishai say? Vayomer Avishai el David, Sagar Elokim hayom et oivecha biyadecha. Ve'ata akenu na b'chanit uba'aretz pa'am achat v'lo eshnelo. Hashem clearly has given Shaul into our hands. He's been pursuing us. Let me strike him. I'll give him one strike with a spear. I'll pin him to the ground. I won't have to repeat it. He'll be gone. The threat will be over. You can become the king. Everything is going to be great. Right? And David says to him, calm down. Vayomer David el Avishai, al tashchitehu, ki mi shalach yado b'Mashiach Hashem v'nika. Who can strike the anointed one of Hashem and not be held accountable and be considered innocent? And of course, we spoke about how David is establishing a precedent here. He's a little concerned. He knows he's going to be the next king. If he creates a situation in which it seems like there are times when it's okay to kill the king, then he's putting his own life in danger and that of his entire dynasty. So he's establishing a precedent here. You can never, under any circumstances, kill the king. But it's also an expression of bitachon. Hashem will take care of it. Vayomer David, Chai Hashem, ki im Hashem yigafenu. O yomo yavo v'met, o b'milchama yered v'nispa. Somehow his day will come, whether he's killed in war, Hashem will see to it that he's taken care of. It's not for us to take Shaul's life in our own hands. And he kind of says to Avishai, take a step back, look at the big picture here. Don't act in the moment. So it could be that his initial thing was we'll go and there may be a battle, and in battle that's a different story. But here to take the life of the king when he's sleeping, he's not posing a direct threat in the moment. That's a different story. Thank you. Hold that thought. We will come back around to that. Yes, definitely. It certainly echoes Abigail's message to him, and this episode does follow that one. So that is significant. Okay, and the implication is David ends when he says to Avishai, calm down, it's not for us to take the life of the king, he ends, Chalila li me Hashem mishloach yadi b'Mashiach Hashem, which implies that even if Avishai were to be the one to take the action, David would be held accountable. Right? It's not Chalila li mishloach yadi, my hand against Mashiach Hashem. So there is this concern on the part of David that Avishai's actions will come back to haunt him, will reflect on him, and that also is going to be a theme with as we see the behaviors of Yoav and Avishai. The next time we see Avishai is sort of part 1 and part 2 of the same episode, but when David is running away from Avshalom in Sefer Shmuel Bet, so there's a kind of a leap in time here. He's running away from Avshalom, and Shimi ben Gera, who is of the family of Shaul, comes out to rain curses upon David as he is, and he's throwing stones at him and cursing him. And Avishai again steps forward in source number 3, Pasuk Tet, the second line, Vayomer Avishai ben Tzruya el HaMelech, Lama yikalel hakelev hamet hazeh et Adoni HaMelech, e'ebrana ve'asira et rosho. Why should this dead dog, he's very insulting to Shimi, why should he be allowed to curse the anointed one of Hashem? Let me just cross over, I'm going to take off his head. Off with his head. Right? And again, what does David say to him? Vayomer HaMelech, Ma li v'lachem b'nei Tzruya. And that's what I titled the shi'ur. What is it with you, Bnei Tzruya, the sons of Tzruya. He addresses him as if he's part of a group. He doesn't say, Ma liv ulecha Avishai. Not, what's your issue, Avishai? You're part of this cohort, Bnei Tzruya. And what is it between me and you that you need to jump to action like this? Ki ko yikalel v'chi Hashem amar lo kalel et David. Leave him alone. Let him curse. Maybe he's doing Ritzon Hashem here. Maybe Hashem was the one who prompted him to curse me. But this is what's meant to happen right now. Leave him alone. And then following that, after the whole situation in which Avshalom is killed by Yoav, which we'll come back to, David is being sort of reinstated. He's on his way back to Yerushalayim. And again, Shimi ben Gera hears that Avshalom has been killed and the merit is over. And he came out to greet David and he says, oh, I'm so sorry, And at this point, what's coming to him? 100%. Yeah. But in this moment, one second, let me just finish the thought. In this moment, Vayan Avishai ben Tzruya vayomer hatachat zot lo yumat shimi ki kilel et Mashiach Hashem. But he said, I'm sorry. He cursed Mashiach Hashem. That's not such a slight, a small slight. That can't be so easily overlooked. And David says to him, Vayomer David, ma li v'lachem b'nei Tzruya. Again, you're acting like b'nei Tzruya. What is it with you guys? Ki tiyuli hayom l'satan, hayom yumat ish b'Yisrael, ki alo yadati ki hayom ani melech al Yisrael. So the way that the Mefarshim understand this is David feels that, I only today, it's like I'm becoming king just today. Right? My kingdom is still new, even though he had been king for quite some time. But it's as if, one second, it's as if I'm starting the kingship all over again. So on the day of a king's coronation, it's customary to issue pardons, right? Not to kill people. We saw the same thing with Shaul when he became king, and he didn't want to fight off do away with those people who had humiliated him, because today is not the day for it. Today we're celebrating a victory. Today we're celebrating the coronation. It's not the right time for punishing the miscreants. So that's why the emphasis on hayom. Ki tiyuli hayom l'satan. Hayom yumat ish b'Yisrael? Ki lo halo yadati ki hayom ani melech al Yisrael. Today he's not going to be punished. But that's not to say that he won't ever be punished. Today is not the right time for it. It's a question of timing. Right? Let me go back to Yerushalayim, get settled, we'll establish the Malchut on strong footing. Don't worry, his time will come. It's sort of like Shaul. The day will come, he'll be taken care of. It doesn't have to be right now, and it doesn't have to be in this manner, in your hands, with this, off with his head.
So my question is, when he was,
Okay, at that point, Mashiach Hashem is referring to Shaul. We can't kill Shaul because he's the anointed one. But David is thinking strategically into the future, knowing that someday that would be him. And therefore, if we establish this precedent that there are times when it's okay to kill Mashiach Hashem, that he would ultimately be endangering himself and his children. Right. Yeah, so Shimi ben Gera, this is also well after David has been king for a long time. This is married Avshalom, so David has been king for years already. That's not, it's not, it is questionable at what time did people become aware of the fact that David had been anointed. And I think the definitive moment, there certainly were rumors flying before then, and there was certain awareness certainly in Shevet Yehuda, the extended family of David before then. But the critical moment is with the death of Shmuel. And we said either Shmuel revealed it before his death or his students revealed it following his death. But around the time of the death of Shmuel, that's when it becomes generally known that David was anointed. But yeah, before that, there would definitely be a gray area and room to question, if somebody insulted David, then how wrong is he? Yeah. Oh, they certainly would have known. Yes. Yeah. 100%. Bnei Tzruya definitely would have known about the coronation of David very early on, and anything they did has to be viewed in that context. Okay, so Avishai we see is hot-headed, quick-tempered, right? But he is extremely loyal to David. He's loyal to the Malchut. He will not tolerate any threat to David or to the Malchut. And yet, he is viewed in this bigger context of Bnei Tzruya in David's mind, and sort of where does that put him in David's mind? Nevertheless, we find this quote interesting, another interesting insight on the part of Rav Moshe David Wali. Ra'iti b'kitvei, in source number 5, quoted by Mishpetzot Zahav again. Ra'iti b'kitvei Ramad Wali Zatzal v'zeh l'shono u'ma she'amar b'lashon hazeh ma li v'lachem b'nei Tzruya. This phrase that David keeps repeating, ma li v'lachem b'nei Tzruya. What is it with you and me, the sons of Tzruya? L'fi shehayu le'elu mizidim ledaber u'lehitasek be'inyanei ha'melucha ke'ilu hayta shelahem. V'chilkuha b'neihem ad kan l'shono. He suggests that Bnei Tzruya overstepped their bounds, and they were there to protect the melucha, and they were there to protect David, which again, one and the same, and they were aware of that very early on, but they overstepped, and they started treating the melucha as if it were theirs, as if they could make decisions. Let me take off his head. Let me go strike him down. Let me get rid of that threat to the melucha. I'm going to deal with the threat to the melucha. And David says, Ma li v'lachem b'nei Tzruya. What is it with you, b'nei Tzruya? You seem to have, ma li, ma ha-malchut, so he puts it into the pasuk. Efshar shezo ha-kavana, ma li v'lachem, v'chi ha-melucha, hi li v'lachem b'shutafut. What? You think the kingship belongs to all of us in some sort of partnership? You're part of the decision-making team? I make the decisions here. You don't tell me who to kill when and how. That's my decision. I send you out to do my mission, and I expect your loyalty, and I expect you to follow through, but you don't call the shots. Ma li v'lachem. It's not yours and mine. It's mine, exclusively. It's a reminder. So there's this mistrust a little bit. As much as David trusts Avishai, when he views him as part of the Bnei Tzruya, associated with Achi Yoav, his more problematic and more complex brother, there's a threat there. Don't overstep your bounds. And we'll come back to Yoav in a couple of minutes. Let's just look a little bit more closely at 2 more appearances of Avishai. The first is the rebellion of Sheva ben Bichri, yet another rebellion that David faces after facing a lot of difficulties within his own family, a lot of challenges from within his own family. He is faced by yet another rebellion, and David turns to Avishai in source number 6, Vayomer David al Avishai, Ata yeira lanu Sheva ben Bichri min Avshalom. Sheva ben Bichri is going to be an even greater threat than Avshalom was, and that was not a small threat. So now is the time to act. Ata kach et avdei adonecha uridof acharav. Go pursue Sheva ben Bichri. Pen matzalo arim betzurot v'hitzilenu, that lest he go find some shelter somewhere, and then we're really going to have a problem. And it's interesting here. To whom does David turn? Not to Yoav. Even though Yoav has come back to him, but Yoav had killed Avshalom by now. And David doesn't really trust him. And he had replaced him as Sar Tzava with Amasa, who is the son of Abigail. It's another nephew of David, first cousin to Yoav and Avishai. And he had sent Amasa to go gather the troops. And what happened? He didn't come back at the appointed time, so there's some question. What had kept him? Was he treacherous to David, or was he legitimately delayed? And that remains, there's a question mark there. We don't know. He didn't come back. So now David says to Avishai, you go take control, not Yoav. But what happens? Avishai goes out. He gathers the people. And he's pursuing, he leaves Yerushalayim, right? He says, Vayetzu acharav anshe Yoav. Even the men of Yoav followed Avishai, which shows us something about his leadership abilities. And the people of Yoav's men trusted Avishai and his leadership. V'hakreti, v'hapleti, the elite fighters, v'chol hagiborim, v'yitzu miYerushalayim l'rdof acharei Sheva ben Bichri. But Yoav encounters Amasa, right? And Amasa lo nishmar b'cherav asher biyad Yoav. He doesn't realize that Yoav is carrying a sword, and Yoav killed Amasa. V'Yoav Avishai achiv radaf acharei Sheva ben Bichri. And now who's in the lead? As soon as he kills Amasa, Yoav sort of usurps Avishai's leadership, and he takes control of the battle. And there's a man who stands by the body of Amasa, and Vayomer, Mi asher chafetz beYoav umi asher leDavid acharei Yoav. If you really, follow, you need to follow those who, and it's interesting, he puts Yoav first before David. Whoever wants to follow Yoav and defend David, follow Yoav. Acharei Yoav. Yoav is very much back in control, but it's a control that he took upon himself. It was not granted to him by David. So that will also become significant. One last episode with Avishai is the one that I opened with, this very puzzling, V'tehi od milchama lePlishtim et Yisrael, vayera David v'avadav imo, vayilachamod Plishtim, vaya'af David. And David became tired, and v'yishbi benov asher b'yilidei ha'arafa, u'mishkal keino 300 mishkal nechoshet, v'hu chagur chadasha, vayomer lahakot David. And Yishbi benov, who was one of the sons of the giant, and gives us the weight of his sword, and the last time we saw such measurements was with Goliath, who was his brother, and he says, and he's chagur chadasha. He's new to his armor, and when you have a soldier who's wearing arms for the first time, what does he want to do? Prove himself. Right? He says, I'm going to go out and do something big to prove myself as a warrior, and Yishbi benov pursues David, Vayomer lahakot David. He's like, I'm really going to prove myself. I'm going to go out there and kill David. Vaya'azor lo Avishai ben Tzruya. And Avishai comes and helps David. Vayachet haPlishti vayimitehu, and he killed Plishti. And then the people said to David, you can't go out to war anymore. We need you to stay home. The light of Israel shouldn't be extinguished. There are two fascinating midrashim on this pasuk. It's difficult to understand. What does it mean? David got tired and Avishai helped him. David was a great warrior. Avishai was also a great warrior. And then, why Avishai and not Yoav? So the first midrash is brought in Breshit Rabbah. Both midrashim are coming in the context of a discussion about kfitzat haderech. Kfitzat haderech is when a person is traveling and the road sort of folds up, right? So he's traveling from point A to point B, and instead of it taking 3 days or whatever length of time it would take to travel from point A to point B, the road miraculously shortens, okay, and he sort of jumps from point A to point B and he gets there immediately. So there are 4 cases of this that are cited in the Midrash and in the Gemara. Eliezer, Eved Avraham, when he went to find a wife for Rivka, is one of them. Okay, that's Kfitzat Haderech. So this episode is cited in the context of that discussion, that Avishai experienced the miracle of Kfitzat Haderech, to go help David. That the road sort of folded up for him. Okay, so first we find who's Yishbi benov. Why is he called Yishbi benov? The Midrash asks, Bimei Yishbi benov asher b'yilidei harafa. And there came a point during a battle at which David and Yishbi benov were facing one another, and each was afraid of the other. Okay, it's an interesting, it's almost like a repeat of the confrontation between Goliath and David, where they're standing there, there's a face-off between the two of them. And it's very unclear who's going to come out on top. And in this case, they're afraid of each other. David wasn't afraid of Goliath. Why is he afraid of Yishbi benov? And Yishbi benov, okay, he's a novice, but he's a giant. And David is not a giant. So there's something going on here, which this midrash does not explore that any further, just says that they were each afraid of one another. Be'otah sha'ah, I'm on the 4th line towards the end. Be'otah sha'ah amar David, halavai hava li chad min bnei achoti diyate v'yisaya'ini. If only one of my nephews, one of my sister's sons were here, would come and help me. Miyad vayazor lo Avishai ben Tzruya, and immediately Avishai ben Tzruya appeared. That's the Kfitzat Haderech. And Rabbanan Amrei, I'm just skipping a few words, but Rabbanan Amrei, afilu haya b'sof ha'olam, hitiso HaKadosh Baruch Hu v'heviyo b'heref ayin. Even if he had been at the other end of the world, HaKadosh Baruch Hu would have flown him there, and he would have arrived instantly, so that David should not endure any more tsa'ar. So it's a miraculous event that's cited in the Midrash, and it doesn't go into a lot of detail. The Gemara goes into a lot of detail, and this, J.K. Rowling has nothing on this Gemara. Okay, if you're familiar with Harry Potter, this is where she got it from. This is, fascinating. I don't have a watch. Yeah, well, I want to get to Yoav, so I don't have a lot of time. I'm not going to read all the Aramaic. It's here for those who want to have it, but I'm going to just go through it a little bit more quickly in English. So Yishbi Benov, who was one of the sons of the giant, and again, very, very large, and carried a very heavy sword, and he is newly armed. My Yishbi Benov, why is he called Yishbi Benov? Rabbi Yehuda Amarav, Ish Sheba al Iskei Nov. Ish ba al Iskei Nov. Nov, what does Nov remind us of? Iyar HaKohanim, right? The city that Shaul decimated. So the Midrash says that Hashem came to David at a certain point and said, you're accountable. It's your fault because you endangered the city of Nov by going there and you saw that Doeg HaAdomi was there and you didn't take note of him and you weren't mindful of what the consequences of your actions could be. So therefore you are, to a certain extent, accountable for what happened in Nov. What punishment do you want for this? Do you want to fall into the hands of your enemies or that your children should die? So what would any parent answer? I'll fall into the hands of my enemy. So it happened that David went out to hunt one day, and the Satan appeared to him in the form of a deer and led him into Plishti territory. It's an amazing Gemara, and this is a Gemara. It's not some like fanciful story. So the Satan led him into Plishti territory, and he was sighted by Yishbi Benov. And Yishbi Benov, who was another son of Orpah, said, he's here, the one who killed my brother. I'm going to get him. And he started pursuing him. And eventually he caught up to David, and he did catch him, and he tied him up, and he pushed him under a bad, a wine press. And this is he was able to lift the stone of the wine press and put David underneath it, and a miracle happened for David, and a ditch formed under the wine press, and David was sort of lying there in the ditch, helpless, and with the wine press on top of him, and that's when and Yishbi Benov tried to kill him, and he was unsuccessful. And at that moment, it gets even better. It happened to be Erev Shabbat, because I don't know about you, it's always Erev Shabbat when a family member gets into a sticky situation and needs medical attention, right? My house, every one of my kids, stitches, broken arms, whatever, was always either Erev Shabbat or Shabbat itself, always. So here too, Avishai, David's cousin, his loyal defender, was washing his hair for Shabbat, and all of a sudden in the water he started to see blood stains. But some say that's not what happened, that there was a dove that came and fluttered its wings over him while he was washing his hair for Shabbat. And this indicated to him that something was wrong with David. How? There's a lot of parshanut, what the exact message, how did he interpret that message, but he understood from whichever way it was that David is in trouble and he needed to get to him very quickly. Then this is very interesting little, almost aside in the story, he realizes that the quickest way for him to get to David is to ride on David's own horse, because that's the swiftest animal that is to be found, but he knows that he's not allowed to ride on the king's horse. It's the king's horse. So he runs to the Sanhedrin and he asks them if that's the fastest way to go. Am I allowed to ride on the king's horse in order to save him? And they said yes. So he took the king's horse and he ran, and then he experienced this miracle of Kfitzat Haderech, and he comes and he sees David in trouble, and Yishbi Benov, when he sees Avishai approaching, says, well, that's not fair. Now there's 2 against 1. So now I'm for sure gonna lose. So he took David out from under the gat, and he threw him up in the air, and he put his spear into the ground so that David would fall on top of the spear. He says, okay, I'll get rid of one and I'll just fight the other. Avishai sees this, and while David is up in the air, he recites the Shem HaMiforash, the special name of Hashem, and David is suspended in midair. Okay, the Shem Hashem is able to sort of keep him there suspended in midair, at which point Avishai, Yishbi Bnei was probably standing there like, what's happening? And Avishai shouts out to David, how did you get yourself into this situation? And David says to him, well, Hashem came to me and offered me, he asked me, do I want to be punished with the death of my children or fall into the hands of my enemies? So I said, fall into the hands of my enemies. So Avishai says to him, well, take it back. Like, daven to Hashem and reverse your request. And David says, I can't, help me. You have to help me. And Avishai then davens for him, and that's very briefly, Rashi there on the parak says, Vaya azor lo Avishai. How did he help him? He helped him b'tfilah. What was his tfilah? Hashem, take it back. Right? We'll worry. He says to David, let your sons worry about themselves. When are sons punished, according to the Torah, when are sons punished for the sins of their fathers? Only when they persist in those same sins. So it could be that if you say, let my sons be punished, they'll redeem themselves. You're in the moment. Your life is in danger in this very moment. Save yourself. That's paramount. So the two of them daven together, and with Avishai's help, David is saved, and he lands safely. And Avishai again says the Shem HaMeforash, and David lands safely on the ground, and the two of them begin to run, and they're being pursued by Yishbi Bnei. They get to a place called Kobe. I don't know if that's the same as Ein Kobe, off in Park Begin, but maybe. So that's where they run to a place called Kobe, and they look behind them, and Yishbi Bnei is gaining on them, and they're afraid that they're going to die, and they turn around and they say, sorry, I skipped one significant part of the story. When Avishai gets to Gat, the first person he sees is not Yishbi Bnei. The first person he sees is Orpah. She's still alive, and she was spinning on a spinning wheel, like Sleeping Beauty. And she saw Avishai, and she said, oh, what can I do for you? And meanwhile, she surreptitiously snapped off the spindle of the spinning wheel, and when he approached her, she threw it at him in order to kill him, and he caught it. And she says, give me back my spindle, and he threw it back at her and struck her in the head, and she died. Okay? So now, that was, and then he gets to Yishbi Bnei. This is a great story. I told my kids this story. We did a hike one year on Yom Ha'atzmaut up to Tel Tzafit, which is identified as Gat, and I told them the story like there on the spot where it happened, which is very cool. But anyway, so so at this point they're in Kobe, and Yishbi Bnei is approaching, and David and Avishai are being pursued, and they look back and what can we do? And Avishai yells out to Yishbi Bnei, go visit your mother in her kever. And when he hears that his mother has died, his strength left him, and Avishai was able to kill him, and that's where it says Vayachet haplishti, and he saved David. What a story, right? So what do we do with this story? So the Maharal in Chidushei Agadot says as follows: V'yesh lefaresh kol ha'ma'amar hazeh kemashma'o. Take it literally. This happened. Absolutely. We can absolutely take this 100% literally. This is what happened. Hashem can do anything, right? And Hashem brought this about. Shehayakach b'muchash u'benigla. It was absolutely in the sensory world, in the world of physical perception, banigla, revealed. It was an open and revealed miracle. Aval yoter nira lefaresh kol zeh inyan sichli. He says, but we can also, he says, maybe it's even better to explain it as a metaphor. And it's a very long Maharal, and he goes through all the different points that are made in the story. But his point is not that it didn't happen. He really believes 100% this happened. But his question is, why is it recorded in the Gemara? There were a lot of things that happened in the time of the Gemara when there was a much more open and direct relationship with Hashem, things that we today would consider very, bizarre and inexplicable. But at that time, you have all the nisim that happened in the house of Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa. Like for those who believed in Hashem very, very black and white, in a black and white way, they lived in a different realm. They lived in a realm of open and revealed miracles. So the fact that it happened, incontrovertible, and if that's where you want to leave it, that's fine. But says the Maharal, we'll gain more by understanding it as a metaphor, because really that's why it was written down. It was written down to teach us certain lessons, certain messages. So he goes through many, many points in the story, which we don't have time for, but I do want to highlight just a couple of ideas that the Maharal shares with us that this is why the story was written. So he says, because it tells us a lot about Avishai. Number one, it tells us that Avishai was incredibly spiritually sensitive. He is on a very high level of Kedusha. He talks about how he was washing his hair before Shabbat, that he was clearing his head of any distractions from Kedusha. That's the metaphor of washing his hair, cleansing his mind from any distraction. So he's able to be very, very focused. And that's why he's able to receive this message that David is in trouble, that he has to go help him, and to have the clarity and the presence of mind to be able to utter the Shem HaMeforash with such clear intentions that he's able to save David's life that way, that without lifting a finger. We don't need his physical bravery, his physical gvura, which certainly he possessed, but he uses his spiritual gvura, his kibush hayetzer, the fact that he was able to completely clear his mind, and he went to help David in a state of absolute kedusha, and in that way he was able to save him. So we see the incredibly high spiritual level of Avishai, this exalted level of tzidkut. And we also see, very significantly, Avishai's deep loyalty to David and his respect for his position as king. There's that whole bit about he's going to ask the Sanhedrin. What do you mean? He's just go. You go to ask the Sanhedrin if I can ride his horse? Yes, because he knew that there is this suspicion, there is this perhaps question mark about Bnei Tzruya and Ma li v'lachem, and they overstep the bounds and think the Malchut is a little bit their own. How would it look if he just goes and takes the king's horse? So, no, I have to ask the Sanhedrin. I have to get permission because I want it to be very clear. My loyalty to David is absolute. I'm not trying to usurp him by riding his horse. Chas v'chalila. Just the opposite. So those are just a couple of points that the Maharal raises that are significant to understanding the dynamic between David and his nephews. So ultimately, this is the last time we see Avishai. Ultimately, we see that it is Avishai who is called upon to stand out at David's side and to save him. It's not Yoav, because Yoav is much more complex. So I'm not sure how much time we have left, because I don't have... Oh, my goodness. Okay. That's the problem when you don't have a watch. All right. So we'll do part 2 in a very small nutshell. Very important statement in the Gemara. Amar Abba Bar Kahana, ilmale David lo asa Yoav milchama, ve'ilmale Yoav lo asak David baTorah. There's a symbiotic relationship between the two of them. If not for, I'm in source number 11, if not for David, Yoav would not have been able to succeed in war, and if not for Yoav, David would not have been able to sit and learn Torah. So what does this mean? David would not have been able, lo asak David baTorah. They say, later it says, Vayhi David oseh mishpat u'tzedakah l'chol amo, v'Yoav ben Tzruya al hatzava. The pasuk tells us, David was busy with mishpat u'tzedakah, ensuring justice in the land, and Yoav was out fighting the wars. Well, what's the juxtaposition there? Because Yoav gave David the freedom to learn Torah and apply it. You can't do, says the Gemara, you can't execute justice, tzedakah u'mishpat, unless somebody's really osek baTorah, really engaged steadily in the study of Torah. If somebody, learned a little Torah in their youth and then goes out and thinks that he's done, and now I can oset tzedakah u'mishpat, he's mistaken, because the world gets in the way and things, distract us, and our perspective shifts as we're involved in other realms. David had to have that freedom to mamash be osek baTorah in order to effect justice. And the only way he could do that was with the peace of mind that was afforded him by knowing that Yoav was out conducting the wars. On the flip side, Yoav would not have been able to succeed in battle had it not been for David being osek baTorah. So there is a very necessary symbiosis between the two of them. If anything were to disrupt that equation, neither of them would be able to continue to be successful, which is very significant in terms of understanding why David gives Yoav the leeway that he does. Right? In the end, he takes care of him. But why didn't he punish him immediately when he killed Avner? Right? Or why didn't he punish him immediately when he killed Amasa? If he felt that those two were so wrong, he couldn't. Because there's a moral relationship between the two of them, and if that relationship is disrupted, then the whole Malchut could have fallen apart. But he tells his son Shlomo at the end of time, right? Don't let Yoav get away with it, because he spilled innocent blood, or he doesn't say innocent blood, Dmei milchama b'shalom. He misappropriated, right? Blood that should have been spilled, had it been under the conditions of warfare, that's one thing. But he took blood b'shalom, and that's not okay, and it reflected on the Malchut. Because that's what, as we said earlier with Avishai, when he says to him, Chalila li, right? There was no question of David killing him. Avishai was the one who said, I'm going to go kill him. But David said, Chalila li, I can't spill blood because what you do reflects on me. And that's part of the problem with his issue with Bnei Tzruya. The Malbim talks about this, the Abarbanel talks about this, how when he says, Mali v'lachem Bnei Tzruya, you're the sons of my sister, and yet you're not taking into account how your behavior reflects on me, and meaning the Malchut. You are endangering the very Malchut that you are sworn to defend. How could you do that? So he says to Shlomo, you have to take care of it. You have to eliminate that threat to the Malchut. You don't have that symbiotic relationship with Yoav that I have. I couldn't do anything about it, because that also would have endangered the Malchut. But you have to take care of it. B'chochmatcha. Act b'chochma. Do what you know needs to be done in order to eliminate the threat. Okay, we had a lot of additional sources that we didn't get to, which is chaval, but I just want to cite just one or two where Yoav expresses his loyalty to David, following the whole complicated situation with Uriah, where Uriah had expressed loyalty to Yoav over David, and was guilty of perhaps mirida b'malchut. Then Yoav, there's this very strange little keta where Yoav comes to David towards the end of the battle that he's been fighting, in source number 17. Well, the text is in 16, right? And he calls David and he says, you finish up. Because if I finish the battle, people might say Yoav won the war instead of saying David won the war. So you come out to just finish the battle. And Rav Nevin says so beautifully, Shlita, Lo matzinu kadavar hazeh b'chol haTanach. We never seen anything like this before. Shasar hatzava hamazik et malko likrat sof hamilchama kedei latet lo maftir b'kibush ha'ir. He gives him maftir? You come up and finish the battle? Where else in Tanakh do you see such a thing? But he says he was trying to prove his loyalty to David. I'm not the threat that Uriah suggested that I might be, where there are people I'm gathering a little group of people to my side of elite warriors, and someday we're going to rise up against you. It's not like that at all. I'm really loyal to you, I promise. This is so you come win the battle. And we have this very unusual scenario. And we also see Yoav when he interferes and he with the situation with Avshalom, and he has Avshalom after Avshalom killed Amnon, and he has him brought back to Yerushalayim. Right? And he sends the woman to tell David the mashal, and David recognizes, he knows Yoav very well, and he says, Hayad Yoav itach b'chol zot? Like, I don't think you did this on your own. Was Yoav behind all this? And she says, wow, Adonai HaMelech, you're so smart, you figured it out. Right? And then Yoav is so thrilled. The king says to Yoav, go bring Avshalom back. And Yoav says to him in source number 18, Vayomer Yoav, sorry, Hayom yada avdecha ki matzati chen beinecha Adoni HaMelech. Wow, you took my advice. You're listening to me. I know that I found favor in your eyes. Like, wow, Yoav is like overcome. Why? Because there was that suspicion on the part of David. Maybe he's being disloyal to me. And Yoav is like, phew, now he doesn't suspect me anymore. I redeemed myself. But of course, then he goes and he acts against the will of David, and he does kill Avshalom, which the Navi absolves him of, right? The Navi says he saved Yisrael by doing that. But David still is unhappy with him. We said he had replaced him and didn't return him to the position of Sar Tzava. Okay, so I just want to conclude really with what made the difference. We see this hot-temperedness in the entire family of David. His nephews, his brothers, right? They're all this quick-tempered, jump to action, and David's the one saying, hold off. Look at the big picture. Think strategically. Where did he learn this from? Abigail, right? Because she was the one who said to him, think about, that's the last source that you have. Hold on a second, it's 26. Hashem will make it happen. Hashem will bring it about. And the time comes, and you're going to be king. ולא תהיה זאת לך לפוקה ולמכשול, למכשול לב לאדוני, ולשפוך דם חינם. Think about this, right? Don't let this be a trap for you, that you're going to be quick-tempered and spill blood for no reason. Like he wanted to kill Naval for not helping him out and his whole household. Hashem will take care of it. And David, he had that in him because he knew that from the time he stood against Goliath. And he said, Hashem will take care of it. But she was the one who taught him, as a king, you always, in every situation, that's how you have to be thinking. Hashem will take care of it. Yes, you're the king. You have to represent the melucha. You're not just representing yourself as an individual. Think about the big picture and have bitachon. And that's the message he learns from her. And that's the message that continues to resonate in the oref, right? The women at home who set the tone for what's going on the battlefield. The women are the ones who have to say, look at the big picture. We're part of something much bigger than ourselves that's going on. And the women provide the strength for the nation. And we should be zocha to that strength.